I'm Danielle Mitchell, and this is the Poetry Lab podcast. I started the Poetry Lab 10 years ago to help struggling, self-taught writers like me find a place in their community to write, read, learn, and collaborate. As an intersectional feminist, writer, and teaching artist, I help writers tap into their craft with radical self-compassion, unlike anything they've ever seen in the creative writing classroom before. If you're a creative person trying to establish a writing practice in the real world, this podcast is designed to help you carve out the time, the courage, and the inspiration to keep writing your new shit. Are you ready, poet? Let's get into it.
Welcome, poets, astrology enthusiasts, and poetic astrology enthusiasts alike to the Poetry Lab podcast. I'm Jessica June Cato. You can call me Jess, your astrology-obsessed poetry bestie. I'm a writer and poet based in Southern California, and I learn about astrology so you don't have to. I love to share what I know with poets and writers like yourself. My favorite thing is to look at astrology as a tool to help embolden, enliven, and elevate my craft, and help you do the same. Okay, now that we're acquainted, let's get to the star of the show. Today, we're going to be talking about why poets love the moon. Have you ever read a poem that mentions the moon? Have you ever written one? Be honest. The moon has been a source of inspiration and fascination for humans since forever, and for poetic humans, a timeless love story. So, let's romp through the moon's lore and symbolism in astrology to answer the question, why do poets love the moon? Okay, so what is the moon? IRL, a rock that orbits Earth. Eons ago, a Mars-sized planet crashed into Earth and debris stuck around Earth's orbit and made the moon. How we know that, but not what's at the bottom of the ocean, seems fishy to my conspiracy theorist Aquarian ways, but whatever. What is the moon in astrology? Well, if you were at the Astrology for Poets Brain Trust at the Poetry Lab last November, you already know. YK. The moon is one of the luminaries. Root word lum, meaning light, L-U-M. The luminaries are the sun and the moon. Not only do they provide us with light, but the luminaries keep life moving here on Earth. To put it ultra, super, duper simply, like no nuance at all, in astrology, the sun is your purpose, and the moon is your emotions. It's the emotional landscape as we live out that purpose. So, physically, on this planet that you're standing, sitting, or driving on, what would the world be like without the moon? Well, there'd be no tides, and that would be wild, as a Southern California girly eye cannot. And we watch a lot of nature documentaries around here, so let me tell you, the tides are so crucial. Movements of the ocean provide life-giving and life-sustaining nutrients to, everywhere. The tides move all the goodies around and disperse the carbon and the oxygen and all that stuff. The stagnancy, if the moon was gone, would affect all of us. There would be no tilt. The moon keeps the Earth's tilt stable. The tilt is what gives us seasons. Scientists are pretty sure that, without the tilt, we'd be in an ice age. So, no thank you. And last but surely not least, the animals who rely on the patterns and seasonal changes to cross the planet would be all but doomed. So, thanks, moon. So now let's shift gears and think astrologically. What would we be like without what the moon symbolizes? Without our emotions? Well, we'd be blankly interacting with our life and its purpose. The moon is what makes life worth living, because you could be living your purpose. You could have your dream job, your dream home, but still not feel fulfilled. While the sun moves us and gives us direction, the moon, true to form, is more elusive. When the moon is out of balance, we aren't necessarily motionless. You can't necessarily see it, but we're lost all the same, and we are lonely. What good is the ride of life if you can't lean into your deepest joys, grow in love, nurture yourself, And for that matter, what is joy without sorrow? The cycles of the moon mirror our inner landscape. Okay, so now let's talk about the moon sign in astrology. Stay with me here. I'm going to kind of rapid fire some ideas. I have faith that you are all creatives and you can stay with me because honestly, just rapid firing some fragments and facts is faster than trying to make all this sound pretty. And quite frankly, we don't have the time or else I would. So let's talk moon sign in astrology. The sun is our purpose, the passion behind our drive. The sun is a fiery ball of burning death, far enough away that it works like a battery for our little planet. The sun rules Leo, the fixed fire sign. Fixed things stay. The sun never moves. So our soul and purpose never leave us. But where does that leave the moon? The moon reflects the sun always. Water is reflective by nature. The moon controls tides. So the moon is watery. We as humans are about 60% water. The moon is our emotions and how we live with them, move through them, and use them. The moon rules one sign, and that sign is Cancer, the cardinal water sign. Cardinal signs begin things. Our desire to belong and bond with people never leave us. Our ability to feel never disappears. The moon sign is what we need. The moon sign is how we human. Okay. So now, especially with AI, we can make robots that have purpose. What's a Roomba? Typically they're going to be programmed to organize or tidy. I think some even serve food. While human purpose gets much deeper and cooler. I want to develop a cure for disease. I want to write a book that helps people. I want to develop oil spill eating fungi to save the environment. That's real. Look it up. Why aren't we funding these things? As these unsettling technological developments get better and better and better, they will not be able to be human. To be human is to feel. To be human is to bond. To be human is to love and be flawed and be vulnerable, and the moon knows this. Fluid, cyclical, and ever-changing, the moon symbolizes so many things. How could she not? Ancient, dependable, and beautiful. We have been whispering our secrets to her for eons. So here's a list of the many things that the moon is associated with. Emotion, obviously. You can't have a good bond or a good cry for that matter without it. Nourishment, needs, wants, and cravings. We can look to what sign the moon is in for clues on how to nourish ourselves. Foundation, home, lineage, family, and or chosen family. Not all the planets care about this stuff. Most planets just kind of hurtle ahead, but the moon is nostalgic in that way. And the body, like Chani Nicholas says, the physical experience of our life, how the body holds emotion. That's moon. That's moon sign stuff. So, like I said, the moon rules one sign, and that sign is Cancer, so I would be remiss if I did not talk about Cancer. Cancer wants to initiate the bonds of family, to care for and to nurture and to love and to feel. Always feel. The moon in its domicile or home of Cancer has to do with a shell of protection. Think about a crab, if you will. And as a Cancer moon myself, let me tell you, the need for an inner life, like your heart is a room and you need to kind of like step in and close the door sometimes, is so real. Now, I'm not a Cancer sun, okay? It's not my purpose to feel and bond outwardly in the world, but when it comes to my heart and my inner world, oh man, I need that. And the moon in its exaltation, so the difference between a domicile and an exaltation, because every planet has places where it's tricky and places where it's a superstar. So where it's a superstar is called its exaltation. So the moon exalts in Taurus, generative and steady Taurus, which at first glance is kind of like ironic for the moon's ever-changing, fickle nature. And let me quote Chani again because she's just that good. About Cancer, Chani says, Cancer is a sign about family and nourishment and caring for one another, building bonds with one another, safety and protection. The waters of Cancer are the waters of the womb, the waters of creation. Cancer is a water sign. It's a cardinal sign, and it initiates us into feeling. It reminds us how sensitive and vulnerable we are. It cries because it has access to vulnerability. So next time somebody teases you about being too sensitive because you're a poet, just say, my mother, parenthetical, the moon, loves me anyway. Moving right along, before we dive into the moon poetry connection, I need to take a tiny detour. A beautiful, sweet Venusian detour. So, Venus and the moon have a thing. Venus rules poetry, along with Neptune, but we're putting a pin in Neptune for now. But this makes a lot of sense, right? Venus is the goddess of love, beauty, and art. Poetry is the art of language. So, speaking of exaltations, Venus's exaltation, the sign it loves being in the most, the sign where it can do the most with it putting out like the least amount of effort and energy, is Pisces. And Pisces is poetic to its core, utterly. It wants nothing more than to dissipate and become art itself. The sign of Pisces is not bothered by the pushing and pulling of the world. Lackadaisical as a lazy river. Venus loves that shit. Those are some of Venus's favorite vibes. And Pisces is also about the depths of the subconscious, what is hidden from the outside world. With that in mind, we can see Venus a little clearer, and we can see its love of poetry a little clearer. Poets are always about the subterranean meaning. So, why am I talking to you about Venus? Because the things that nourish the moon overlap with the things that nourish Venus. Things like connection, fostering safety, softness and peace, unity. I thought it was worth it to note that they have both been worshipped as goddesses by people all over the world since forever. They're both concerned with the senses. They're both concerned with the body. Venus sort of accentuates the moon here. Like, if the moon makes us capable of feeling things, then Venus is like, well, if we're feeling, I mean, we might as well. Can we just make everything feel really good? Feel as luxurious as possible? Relaxing and pleasurable? The moon exalts where Venus rules. Venus rules Taurus. The moon loves being in Taurus. Venus offers the moon Taurus a lush, steady, secure place of both generative work and languid rest. We're talking about the moon here. She has many faces. Poets love the moon, and sometimes without even knowing why. They tap into the moon being superpowered under Venus's watch. Venus, the ruler of poetry. The lunar-Venus connection is a landscape in which not all feelings are created equal. I say this because not all signs and planets welcome feelings. Period. To a few planets and signs, all feelings are equally ridiculous. You ever tried to cuddle a Saturnian for too long? Good luck. So, not all feelings are equal, and this is Cancer's balance. This is the moon's balance, the balance between protecting your inner world and inner peace and innermost feelings and being vulnerable. Poets, does this sound familiar? Like, authentically vulnerable. Honestly, as a Cancer moon, I feel like this is one of Cancer's hurdles, being authentic. Cancer feels a lot like Libra to me in a lot of ways. It could be that cardinal energy, like the desire to start something, because Libra wants to start relationships and Cancer wants to start familial bonds, like familial relationships. So they're very similar. The Cancerian urge to connect, the Libran Venusian urge to connect, that desire can sometimes overtake authenticity and can run the risk of people pleasing. Sera. The risks we take for loving connection. I don't know. I don't relate. Okay, the moon in poetry. So now that we've got a feel for the moon sign, and Cancer, let's talk poetic overlap. besties, let's talk Venn diagram. Poetry often involves laying it all on the line. We become vulnerable on the page. Vulnerability is the name of the moon's game. People that feel like family get our emotions unfiltered, for the most part. We are most comfortable to be ourselves at home. Poets are superheroes because they tap into this honesty. I know so many poets that share their work in workshops and with poets and in community, but flinch, like hard at the thought of reading the same poem around loved ones. Poetry is taking the moon's radical honesty, its innate need for connection, and bringing it to art. And I'd like to point out the juxtaposition of being secretive and honest, because the moon is undoubtedly secretive too. The moon is elusive. It literally disappears sometimes, like every month. Its watery nature lends itself to slipping into the ether every now and again. So if the moon rules Cancer, a cardinal sign that wants to begin emotional connection, bonds like family, well, you can't have a successful Cancerian mission without honesty. To build something loving that lasts requires vulnerability. And that's something that poets have got in spades. In order to connect with the reader, a poem has got to be vulnerable about something, anything. Typically, the speaker is going to have a point, and we're going to have stakes. Poetry is nostalgic, and the moon loves a memory. When you think moon, think cauldron. Think waters of creation. Think witches making a big stew. Think scrying. Think Dumbledore's pensive. Pensive. However you say it. The thing, with the puddle, with the water, the memory. This is where the moon in Cancer earn their toxic badge. I firmly believe that all signs have superpowers and all signs are toxic in their own ways. Even the sweethearts of the zodiac have their flaws, because while nostalgia can be used for rose-colored preciousness, right? And those are pretty poems. It can also become a grudge. Cancers remember it all and hold grudges because of the moon. It's in her nature. Our favorite poems are the ones that ground us in specificity. With enough detail that we can zero in on where the speaker is coming from, we are dropped into a moment that we are invested in. A moment or a memory that means something. It means something because of the feelings it evokes, because of how attached to that moment or that place or that person the speaker of the poem is. Nostalgia is like the happy strings of life are still gloriously connected to my being. Just bittersweet and sweet alike. Nostalgia sprouts from the moon's ability and desire to feel. The moon reflects the sun, and poetry reflects hot spots in time. Poets capture the vital pulse of their era. Artists bring attention to important things that society deems unworthy. This is why artists are everything and celebrity is trash. That's a hot take straight from me. The Poetry Lab has nothing to do with that opinion, but I stand by it firmly. While we're talking about being reflective, poetry also reflects the story that the speaker's telling. And like the moon, whose image changes every day, some poems give us glimpses of a story, a flash of emotion. Just one flash of emotion in the poem that could mean so many things. Or a line, one line from a confrontation. A crescent. Some poems illuminate more. There's more storytelling, like full moons. They stretch over a narrative, or maybe they're world building, or maybe they offer dialogue. And to me, at least, both are beautiful. The moon has the ultimate show, don't tell mentality, and poets embody this innately. Change my mind. Poetry is about the spaces between and the meaning beneath. Some books rely on what is unknown and not showing. Like the entire genre of mystery needs to leave information out to be effective. Poetry can mean everything and nothing. Lunar themes live a lot in poetry. Poetry on belonging, connecting, legacy, ancestry, the body, nourishment, emotions, and truths of the heart. Overlapping themes of the moon that poets embody without trying show up constantly, all the time. How they're feeling, their relationship with their own body, what they need, what they want, what they crave. All these things show up in the poetry of every poet, even the aesthetic of poetry. Billy Collins said in an episode of Masterclass something about when the poem is done and you're revising, when you're making line breaks and making it pretty and it looks like, quote, little flags across the page. You know, like not all poetry has this aesthetic, like I'm talking to you, prose poetry, but a lot of it does. So the idea, like the aesthetic of the blank page, like the blank space on the page, adds to the experience of a poem when it's done right. And this mirrors the moon in its ability to physically grow and dwindle and not lose any power because of it. And I don't know, I think that's kind of beautiful. The luminaries are so important because they dictate how we live our lives out. I would argue that it's impossible for poets to separate their poetry from their sun and moon placements. As per my last episode on Wisława Szymborska and her Cancer sun spilling across every page. So the moon sign spilling across the page could look like the sign that it's in. It could look like the house that it's in, what other planets are supporting or pulling on it, and in what ways. Astrology is layered, much like poetry, and there's much more than the line that you're reading. But I promise you that the facets of your own birth chart are there in your writing. Side note, sometimes when I'm on a documentary kick and I'll pop my favorite or most intriguing lines said by someone, like about the person that the documentary is about, like into a Notion page. And so I have this list of like just random quotes. And then when I just can't stand it anymore, I'll pull up the birth chart and it is really wild sometimes. Like I'm speaking for myself and my own research, but I'm not surprised at all that the bad surgeon guy had a god complex, with Pluto, the powerful destroyer, sitting on his Virgo Mercury mind center and squaring the moon, adding a layer of tension and danger to his emotions. I'm also not surprised that he was a magnetic guy with that Leo sun, or that he was lucky, like really lucky, like too lucky, maybe, with Jupiter, the planet of luck, holding hands with the North Node of destiny. Things he said and things that were said about him tipped me off to this long before I saw the chart. We embody our charts without realizing it. We grow into them every day. Astrology is about self-realization. It's about getting real with yourself. So, like I said before the rant, which I only like halfway apologize for, the facets of your chart are in your writing. And your moon sign is in your poetry because it's how you connect your inner world to your outer world. The moon is what we want, need, and crave. And saying what you need can be hard. That's why the page can know what we want before we do sometimes. Isn't that wild? And that's why our poems know all of our deepest things. We all have pieces that may never know the light of day. The poems know our secrets. The moon is poetry personified. The moon is poetry herself. Poets will always whisper to the moon and scribble on the page and try to reconcile what we feel with what life is. Woo! So that was fun. Poets, proud of you. We covered the moon in all her glory and how she influences us and our poetry just by being her glowing, nurturing self. We learned about Cancer and why they may deserve an extra hug for being nurturing sponges and faucets of emotion, and a special guest appearance by Venus, who is always welcome in my book. If you liked the episode, spread the word, give us a like and a follow, share with a creative friend. If you want more astrology for poets, check out the Poetry Lab's website at thepoetrylab.com. I'm Jess Cato, socials at Just June Writes, and it's been a pleasure, poets. That's all for now. Hope to see you soon at the Poetry Lab.